Greetings tape aficionados, welcome back to Tetracan, a YouTube channel about fixing and using tape recorders. Today we're looking at the Superscope by Marantz, the CD330. This is a unit that's been sent for a general service. I haven't actually powered it up myself. We'll start by looking at all the features one by one, and here we are on the top surface, so we'll interpret some of the bump that's written on the surface of the unit. So it's a Dolby system, that's noise reduction, we can turn it on and off. I've scanned over the user manual and the service manual and it doesn't seem to actually specify which version of Dolby this is, but since this is dated at 1978 according to the manuals, I don't think Dolby C had been introduced for the compact cassette format yet. It says it's a double Dolby system. I think that just means that this will record in stereo. Here on the cassette door we can see total shut-off written. I think that just means that when you stop or when we reach the end of the tape, all the motors will shut off and the heads will retract from the cassette, because on some models the capstan will continue to spin and the heads will remain up when we reach the end of the tape and we have to press stop again in order to actually stop the mechanism. It's a 3-head system, so that means that in addition to an erase head we have separate heads for recording and for playback. A lot of the portastudios and other multitrack cassette recorders that I feature on this channel will have a 2-head system where relays or other switching mechanisms in the intimmers of the unit control whether a dual function play and record head is going to be transmitting signals to tape or receiving signals from tape. But we have independent heads for this. When I say independent, they're actually smooshed into one head in the same location that the dual head would be on a portastudio or similar. I think that means that we can use this as a tape delay by hitting record and monitoring from the playback head. A very slight space between the record head on the left and playback head on the right will mean there's a slight time delay between those signals. And so by hooking this up to a mixer, we can set this up as a kind of slapback delay. Because there isn't any control of the speed of the tape player, we don't have any control over the space between repeats. Again, looking at the manuals, I don't actually see the tape speed listed, but I'm pretty sure it's the commercial tape speed of 1 7/8 inches per second if you're in imperial, or if you're in metric, that's 4.8 centimeters per second. And it says it has a super hard Permalloy head. One of the phenomenon we have to deal with when dealing with reel-to-reel players is wear on the head, which can affect performance. But to date, anytime I've seen heads fail on a unit like this or a portastudio, it's just been because the ferrite core or the coil inside the head are damaged. The head casing does not tend to wear in my experience. Probably because they're made of Permalloy, which I assume is steel mixed with something else to make it even more durable. It says it's a professional cassette recorder, CD330. There's a previous model, CD320. I'm not exactly sure what the difference was with that. If I find out later, I'll put them on the screen now. They're carry straps and we can input 2 microphones. So I guess back in 1978, this would be a useful thing to record interviews if you were a journalist, something like that. But it does mean we can repurpose it as a master recorder. I'll confirm this when we start to take it apart, but I believe it's quarter track stereo, meaning that we are dividing the length of the tape into 4 sections. And so you would flip the tape in order to access the other side, meaning you do get 90 minutes recording from a 90-minute tape with 2 tracks going this away and 2 tracks going that away. And you access the material that's printed in the opposite direction by physically turning the tape through 180 degrees. One touch record, I believe, just means that when we push down the record button, the play button will be pushed down at the same time automatically. Servo control, I'm not entirely sure what that means. The most common place that I come across it is when a motor has a servo board inside it, which just means it has a regulator chip and some other gubbins to ensure a steady speed built into the motor. So maybe that's what they mean. And last of all, it says dual flywheel. The main belt that runs from the single motor and drives the capstan actually passes through 2 flywheels. I suppose that just gives us a little bit more stability of pitch compared to if we had 1 flywheel. You can see we have a mechanical counter. These button functions are fairly standard. We've got record, play, we've got rewind and review, and fast forward and cue. And I believe what that means, if we partially hold these down, we will get scrubbing. So we'll hear the tape backwards like that, or if we push it all the way down like that, then the heads will disconnect from the system and it will rewind silently. Likewise, If we press fast forward all the way down, it'll fast forward without us hearing the tape, but if we only pass it down partly, the heads will remain in contact with the tape and we can hear the audio going past fast. And that just allows us to find certain bits in an interview, imagining we are this journalist of yore in 1978 interviewing people. Press stop once to stop the tape, and eject will cause this cassette door to open. Pause pauses the tape. Now let's look at the front panel. We'll go from left to right. We've got dual VU meters. These are not peaking, they're average meters. If we hold down this battery check button, then the left hand of these meters will show you how much charge is in the battery if we have those inserted. We've got a record level dial here. That's just applying gain to the microphones. It is possible to turn this center dial independently from the right. Most of the time, I guess we're going to want to have those two dots lined up so that both the left hand and the right hand channel are receiving equal amounts of gain. But if you had two microphones of different sensitivities, or one person who spoke very quietly and one person who spoke very loudly, imagining you had two microphones in an interview situation, we can make the inset microphone, that is the left one, louder or quieter than the right one. You see I have to hold on to that in order to turn that, because that's really quite stiff. There must be a rubber grommet or something in there to ensure that most of the time these turn as a pair. Here we have a tone and volume control. The center is the tone, so turning this way we're going to accentuate the high frequency, and this way the low frequency. And then this is the volume. I don't see a separate control for headphone level, so I assume this is the volume both for what's coming out of the speaker, which I didn't mention. There's a built-in mono speaker up here on the top surface, and what's coming out of the headphone socket. Moving over here, you can see the headphone socket up here. There's a mic attenuation switch here. So with this switch in the up position, there's no attenuation of the microphone. But imagining you were going to record a very loud sound source, I would want to push that down so the level of signal that's coming from the microphones doesn't overload the preamp. The microphone inputs are here. We'll establish this for certain when I tear the unit down, but I'm pretty sure that these are unbalanced 1/4 inch inputs. So if we were going to connect XLR microphones to that, we would probably want to use cables that have been professionally wired up so that the cold and ground pin were linked and the signal from the 3-pin microphone was being transmitted over only 2 wires to a mono tip sleeve 1/4 inch jack plug. This monster switch has 2 positions, tape or source. I assume that this applies both to the headphone output, the speaker, and line out sockets and so on that we're going to see on this surface in a little bit. In this position, we're hearing what's coming back from the playback head, and in this position, we're hearing what is being sent by the preamps to the record head. Next, we have 2 switches which we set according to the tape type that we have. I've forgotten exactly what the unit is, I'll put that up on the screen now, but if you look at the case of a blank tape, it will tell you what the bias settings are and what the EQ settings are. It just gives us the flexibility that we could put in chrome tape, ferrochrome, or just ferric tape. I'm not an expert on metal tape, so I don't know whether these settings provide for that. I'm pretty sure that in 1978, Type 4 tapes hadn't come out yet. If I'm wrong about that, I'll put that on the screen now. I don't have a metal tape here to test, so that remains for you, the viewer, to experiment with whether metal tapes will work with this. The Dolby Noise reduction can be turned on or off using this switch. And then we have a record mode select switch over here. We can have this in ARL. ARL stands for automatic recording level, manual mode, or limiter. Automatic recording level functions like a very slow compressor. If you were doing a field recording where you went from recording background sounds like birds chirping or crickets or something to somebody's voice or a car passing without stopping the tape and changing the record level dial over to the left there, then there's a circuit in here that would compensate for those changes in level by increasing the record gain during quiet sections and reducing it during loud sections. The other option here is if we have occasional very sharp sounds that might overload the preamp technology, then those very sharp sounds will be limited and pulled down to a level where distortion does not occur. But for full control, over a steady sound where we, the user, set the levels, then we would put it in this manual mode. It's not exactly clear to me how much the record level dial does in either this ARL or limiter mode. We can maybe establish that through experimentation later. Here on this surface, we see an input for 220 volt, 50 Hz, figure of 8 power inlet. There is an internal transformer in here that will provide the main circuit with the 6 volt voltage that it requires. We can turn the speaker on the top surface on and off using this switch. There's an official accessory, it says in the operation manual, where a 12 volt to 6 volt converter which plugs into car battery via the cigarette charger can be used. Here on this surface we have an RCA unbalanced line in, meaning that we could use an external mixer that had phantom power, use the preamps built into that, and in that way we could record to condenser mics. And then we have a line out. So imagining we were using this as a master recorder, then this is where we would get a digital capture or capture to another analog format. This DIN socket here combines the functions of these. At that time, this was a common way to transmit these functions over one cable and interface with other recording gear. We've got 8 ohm speaker outputs from the left and the right hand channel here. This switch here controls whether we're hearing just the left hand recording, just the right hand recording, or both channels of the recording in the speaker in the top. This does have a bearing on what we hear from the headphone socket. You get strange combinations of things in either this position or the lower one. If you want to hear normal stereo sound out of the headphone socket, then we really need to have it up like this in the left position. The battery compartment is here and lifts out like so. You can see that there is room for 4 D-cell batteries here. According to the operation manual, we would get 4 to 8 hours of use out of those batteries, or up to 2 hours if we use the optional rechargeable battery, which is supplied by Marantz and charged through the 6 volt DC input. And here's the underside of the unit. Not much for the user here. The symbol means that it's double insulated, meaning that you can't really get an electrical shock from the chassis. Superscope looks like it's some sort of licensed tie-in. Was that a popular brand at the time? I don't really know. Interestingly, Superscope is in Chatsworth, California, USA, and it's very proud to say this designed by Marantz USA, but it's actually made in Taiwan. I always thought that Marantz was a Japanese company, so that's all a bit confusing really. Noise reduction system manufactured under license from Dolby Laboratories. Dolby and the double-sided D symbol are trademarks of Dolby Laboratories. I think the only thing that I've neglected to mention here is the size of the unit, so I'll just talk about that now. It's quite a chunky boy. It is 3.5 kilograms, a bit less. I think it's 3.3. The footprint of it is a little under 20 by 30 centimeters, and it's a little under 10 centimeters deep. If we just do a quick size comparison with the slightly out of focus Marantz PMD 222, which is a unit that belongs to me, you can see it's about a third smaller both in weight and its footprint. So clearly in the, how many years, maybe 5, maybe 7 years between the production of those units, they obviously got some miniaturization happening. Okay, let's start to take this apart and see what we find.